help women, save lives, and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and welcome to the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. And today on the podcast, we are going to cover the lighthearted topic, Steve, called the bitter pill, how the sexual revolution has made life worse. Sounds like a country song.
That does sound like a country song.
How life has been made worse. Speaking of, you like country music.
I do.
Yeah. Is country music popular up north? Because as a Texan, of course, we sort of write y'all off like y'all don't even listen to it. But
yeah, so Wisconsin is the dairy state, and so there's a lot of farmers, and so there's a
Cowboys.
Yeah, we don't really have a tradition of country artists coming from Wisconsin, but if you're a farmer, your odds are pretty decent that you're listening to country music.
Well, and Garth Brooks got 1 million people in Central Park.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we discussed on the podcast that last year for my 40th birthday, I saw the king of country, George Strait, who is the king definitively.
Yeah, you'll die on that hill.
Oh, yeah. 100 number one hits. Unbelievable. 100. It's a record. All music of all time. He sets the record.
And there's some good crossover there, too, because the stuff that's come out, I'd say the last 10 or 15 years, if it hits number one, that's no guarantee that it's actually good country or that it's actually country at all. And he made real country, and it was popular on the radio.
And still is. So his number one hit from whatever, 1982, is still, everybody loves it, whether it's Amarillo by Morning or The Fireman or whatever. So there's a controversial thing because if you Google it, he's not the number one in sales because that, of course, is Garth Brooks, who ran around the world. I love Garth Brooks, but he's not George Strait. He's not the king of country. But he's running around, he's sweating, he's smashing his guitar, he's yelling at everybody.
Like flying through Texas Stadium.
He had, 1 million people in Belfast, 1 million people in Central Park. He popularized it. He was a great entertainer, so he sold more. And he's the number one selling music artist of all time. And that's pretty amazing.
And George Strait was a decades-long presence. It's kind of unknown, I guess, underreported how short Garth Brooks' career is. He kind of has a comeback now, and it's okay. But he I think he came in '89, and then he retired in like 1998. And there's not a whole lot beyond that sort of, particularly the first handful of years. Everything everybody knows is really from the first 5 years.
And George Strait is still recording new albums.
Okay.
Garth Brooks made a comeback to perform, which I have not seen him. I would love to see Garth Brooks. But he's going to these mega stadiums and doing all these, he's just touring. George Strait is creating new songs that are adding to his record of number one hits because anything he releases goes to number one. But he was a class act, did a tribute to the Police. Gave a veteran a house on stage.
Oh, wow.
But, and this ties into our podcast today about people being lost in the cosmos, which you are not if you listen to this podcast or watch it. But George Strait is not lost in the cosmos. He has not taken the bitter pill of the identity crisis that is going throughout our culture. One of his great quotes, "When I am on stage, it is an illusion and not real. I sing my songs, I don't live them. My real life is at home with my family."
We need more of that. I think it's safe to say we need more of that.
I think we do. So that is the non-bitter pill of George Strait. So I don't know how we got off on that, but country music is.
It's never a wrong time to start talking about country music.
It's not. And one thing for you kids out there, but all the young people, which we no longer are, the new country guys, old school is good. Mm-hmm. Old school's cool. So John Party, Luke Combs, that sort of old school sounding. Who did you go see? The big guy with the beard.
Chris Stapleton.
Who
crushed it at the national anthem at the Super Bowl.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes. So all that sort of old school twang, fiddles.
You like Eric Church at all?
I do like Eric Church because Eric Church is fun. So he has a song and they think he's like supporting gay marriage, and then he actually got interviewed at the I Believe Most People Are Good. Okay. You should love whoever without whatever. I forget what he says. You shouldn't apologize who you love. And
That's Luke Bryan.
Luke Bryan, I'm sorry.
Who's terrible. Who's complete hot garbage.
I like Luke Bryan. Yes, he's fun. That's who I thought we were talking about. Okay, no, I love Luke Combs. I like Luke Bryan. If you take that song, he was interviewed about it because I was like, I hate Luke Bryan after hearing this. He was like, he did it for interracial couples because his friend was marrying, his friend was black and marrying a white girl. And all this flack and all this stuff. He's like, that's ridiculous.
And he was worried Clarence Thomas was going to outlaw it.
He was worried Clarence Thomas was going to outlaw it because that's what the pro-abort said after the overturning of Roe. But they interviewed him. He's like, I have nothing against gay people and all that. But I didn't write it for that. I wrote it for my friend, basically. You love who you love and you shouldn't be ashamed of. That's the line, which totally screams the gay marriage movement. Love is love. But he said it was actually an interracial thing for his friend.
Well, we're going to need to do what we always do when we disagree, which is to leave it to the listeners. If you've got a hot take on Luke Bryan,
he's got some fun. He's got some great song. Country On. Have you heard Country On?
Yeah, it's terrible. It's just not good. It's not good at all.
You're not fun. You're not fun. There we go. That's the conclusion. He's got a little country frat boy going, and I'm typically not into that. The older I get, I love Kenny. I love
Kenny Chesney.
Kenny Chesney. Do you like Kenny Chesney?
Generally, he's kind of made a career off of becoming new Jimmy Buffett.
Not new Jimmy Buffett. He's like the friend in high school where you're not gonna have him over around your kids, but he's fun.
I've got a friend who went to a Kenny Chesney concert at Wrigley Field, and he came out in a Chicago Cubs t-shirt, but he had the sleeves cut off and then re-sewn. And we were speculating, does he have someone on his crew whose job is to okay, we're going to Chicago. You go buy the shirt and you cut the sleeves off and you sew. I don't know.
The sleeve cutting guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the credits on the music video.
I'm gonna say for sure. And when they're on the bus, and the sleeve cutting guy is right here, and the jersey buying guy is right here, and they're like, "Hey, Billy, I'm gonna go get the Andre Dawson Cubs jersey." Mm-hmm. Great '90s reference.
Yeah.
And you're gonna cut off the sleeves. Kenny just yells from the bathroom, "You know that's right!" Something like,
"Go get him, Leroy."
That's how we roll, boys. So he confirms it. He kind of makes the executive decision, but the other guys, they know how Kenny rolls. No, I like Kenny Chesney. I like Luke Bryan. I probably hated Luke Bryan 5 years ago.
You were right at the time.
As I've gotten older in age, I have become more tolerant. Maybe that's having
tolerance.
High school kids oh, he's an idiot loser. And then you listen to them. I'm like, it's a fun song. He's got a lot of good songs. Country On is awesome. It's a tribute to America. What's wrong with you?
It's a gateway drug for listening to Taylor Swift.
No, you're a communist. That's a great American song. Please email us at podcast@40daysforlife.com. And if you don't like George Strait, I understand people that don't like country and they don't mind George Strait. But I'm going to encourage you, if you don't really listen to George Strait, you just kind of heard, some people are I've heard of Frank Sinatra, but I've never listened to him. Go listen to George Strait because he can just straight up sing. And he's 70. When we saw him live, I mean, he was unbelievable. His voice, like you could give him a Frank Sinatra song, you could give him, and he can just sing.
But he's listening to the podcast right now, big fan. And he just
If George Strait, my dream would be that like you're not here right now and George Strait is, and of course he'd probably be like he doesn't like Luke.
No,
Bryan.
he's listening, and he said, "I love the show, but if you are gonna go and publicly say you like Luke Bryan, he would prefer that you not mention him on the same episode at least."
Shame on me for forgetting that George Strait texts Steve regularly, as we just witnessed.
We're pretty tight ever since Amarillo.
That quick moment. Appleton by morning.
Yeah.
Green Bay by morning. All right. Okay, how the sexual revolution made life worse. We'll transition.
It's
that
even
does sound
worse
like
than Luke Bryan.
does sound like a country song. It wasn't supposed to. It was actually supposed to free us and make everything better.
Yeah, a lot of big promises tend to not really turn out in the way the utopian dreams suggested. But, this is an interesting thing right now because I've always thought, Sean, of America as a land of optimism, a land of hope, a land where we believe that our best days are always ahead of us. President Trump would talk about that. President Reagan talked about morning in America. And right now, we can go back to the moviegoer. There's a bit of a malaise. Like right now, we kind of see this attitude that like things are really bad. And I think that's the one thing that everybody agrees on. Whether you're conservative or liberal, there's a lot of problems in our society right now. And I think you can make a strong case that a lot of them are the direct fruit and the indirect fruit of the sexual revolution. A lot of problems that have been caused. I think there's a lot of loneliness, a lot of brokenness, a lot of relationships that have been destroyed by the sexual revolution, even as it promised many things that it's hard to suggest that the sexual revolution did anything other than fail to deliver on the promises that were made.
We did a podcast on Dr. Money. I know, bad reference, but Dr. Money is the founder of the transgender movement, the attack on gender from the 60s. We can put what podcast episode that is in this show because we go way back and look at the fruits of this, but really the apex of the sexual revolution is the annihilation of gender. It's the ultimate feminist goal as well. There's no men. We can be men and there's no men. We swap it out. Maybe you're a girl, but I'm definitely a man. And we annihilate
You're
gender.
two-spirit, right?
Dos.
That's one of the genders.
Yeah, dos spirit, dos equis, whatever they call it. Two spirit. They want to get rid of gender, but the first thing they had to do was get rid of children because really the problem that the sexual revolution was trying to solve is how do we have sex with zero responsibility, mainly sex without babies, which, as many people know, still today, sex causes babies. I know we want to grow them and all these other things, but having sex will cause babies. So here we go. Let's look at some stats. Failure to launch, title of this section. It's made people more immature. So in 1960, 29% of young adults, 18 to 29, lived at home. In 1960, 29% who were 18 to 29 years of age lived at home. It's up to 47% when COVID hit. Post-COVID, 52%.
A majority. That's
The majority of people from 18 to 29, and that is Walker Piercy, moviegoer. I don't know what to do with my life, and I'm totally content with that, and I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah, so I think back to, I think it was my first Christmas after Laura and I got married. And we go to Christmas and my family's all there. And my grandmother gave us gifts. And so my youngest brother opened up his gift and it was like Madden 07 or something like that. And my other younger brother opened up his gift. It was like Madden 07. And then I opened up my gift and it was snowman plates. And to me, this is like the moment where like, even though I can't say, sorry, Grandma, that I was delighted to get snowman plates. Like, I'm not ripping on anyone who like plays a video game now and then, or maybe you play with your kids. I play NBA Jam from like '92 with Peter like once in a while.
That's awesome.
But like, there should probably be a point in life where video games are not like a big part of your life anymore, right? And it's so odd to me that video games went from a kid's thing to like yes, I live at home, there's nothing wrong with that, and I'm playing, I don't know, is Call of Duty the thing? I don't know what the video games are, but
that some of that is an easy cop out, because we grew up when like the Nintendo came out, and you played video games or like Tetris or Super Tecmo Bowl. RBI baseball was awesome. But we always ended up outside. Or there was this like, especially in our house, there was this moment where like mom was like, get outside and get it, and we knew like playing video games, we were kind of getting away with something. Like, we've been doing this for 20 minutes. Where is she?
We had to earn ours through reading. So my parents had like they got these poker chips, and like a blue one was like you read for an hour, you get to play video games for an hour. But I am such a stingy like cheapwad that I would just never play video games. I just read, and then I had like this, I could have played video games for the rest of my life. And never stopped because I refused to spend them.
Okay, but there was still like a cutoff. The thing with video games, and it's all, of course we have Netflix, and it's easy to say these kids want to just sit there and stream and watch all that. I still think that's a symptom, and that's true. Everybody's watching too much TV, and I'm sure 52% of people living at their house are all sitting there streaming Netflix and Amazon and all of that. But there's a bigger picture, which Walker Piercy points out, which is the lack of duty, obligation, moral responsibility, like the healthy ambition. Maybe I should become a plumber, a doctor, a dentist.
Not a streamer, the people who play video games and people pay to watch. Is that how that works? There's people who are like professional video game players, right?
But that's a business, though. I mean,
honest money.
It's honest money. Yeah. I mean, it's not. They're not dealing drugs. I'm now defending the video game kids, but I mean, that's different even. But if you're just, what leads to that is, what else are you going to do? And the parents are obviously just I don't want to get a bunch of emails, but the parents are playing a role in this, or really struggling to kind of fix the problem. And, we all know people where it's like, I just can't get the kid to do anything. But, there needs to be a little bit of a kick in the rear at some point. And if there wasn't, you've created a monster.
What is life for? There's got to be a purpose to it. And hopefully it's something better than Netflix or video games. And that's why we're on this train. I recognize right now that I sound like full, like, get off my lawn. Oh, man.
We are like, these kids today are all on the internet. But we're totally being like the grumpy old man. But to me, that is the symptom. You have to fill your time with something. If you feel like you have no purpose in life, you have no mission in life, and it's not even that we need a purpose-driven life, which Rick Warren made a great book and a popular phrase, but it's not even that. It's not like, well, I need a purpose. It's mission. You have been sent, okay, for Christians. So we're going out into the world. It's not that we have the luxury of just laying around. And I think that is, as St. Paul says, if you're not working, you're not eating. But we have this interesting thing, and it happened during the sexual revolution. We have the baby boomers, who we've harped on a lot, basically because they created all this nonsense and then had kids and voted for Reagan and became accountants. And, we're like, what happened to, I got to be free, I got to be me. You're like, get the commies. What? You were at Woodstock. And I think, and we've benefited from this, a workaholic generation overall. They got after it. They created some great products. We had the boom of the stock market in the 90s. All of that. And yet the irony is that they're kind of a workaholic generation, the ones that actually left Woodstock and went and got a job. And yet their kids are living, or, at least now, 52% are living at home. We overcorrected.
And I think this is sort of the connection between my video game rant, I won't hold you accountable for the video game rant, and the sexual revolution is we've forgotten that we're made for each other. It is not good that man is alone, and now man wants to spend his time alone. Man would rather be playing the video games than providing for a wife and providing for children, and the sexes there's an animosity between us and a failure to live for each other the way that we were intended to. And I think it's made people generally miserable. If you go back to 1960, the average age for marriage for a man was 22, and for a woman it was 20. Now we've gone up 8 years on both of those. Wow. And so you've got sort of this wandering, meandering adolescence where what do you do for those 10 years? You're not learning to die to yourself. You're not taking responsibility for others and loving them. You're just pursuing whatever random interest it is, no matter how fleeting or futile.
Before we move on, I would like to set the record straight. I did play video games as a little kid. We weren't like doing it all the time, but we loved it. Mm-hmm. The last time I played a video game was 2003, right before I got married. I had my wisdom teeth removed, so I was just sitting there, and I forget what my roommate had, but it was college football. I'm like, and now I'm going to take North Dakota State to the national title, all that, and got all the painkillers. And so, so I haven't played since then. With that said, we don't have any video games for our children. They've never had it. Mainly because, if you invited me to your house to play RBI baseball or NBA Jam or Super Tecmo Bowl, I would quit my job and leave my family and live in your basement forever. I can't even, I'm not even putting myself in the situation. It's an occasion of sin. Okay.
This is ultimately why we have Obamacare mandating that you can stay on your parents' insurance until you're 26.
Right, right.
Our grandfathers were storming beaches in Normandy when they were those ages. And
I
don't know. I'm on my video
Shut
game.
up, honey. Jose Canseco's up to bat. Okay. Yeah, it's totally true about Obamacare.
One last thing on this point. It's not only...
This is the immature point.
Yeah. This sexual revolution has made it our relationships aren't better as was promised, but now you see the young people who are doing the video games or the social media, they're not even pursuing relationships. It's not a goal anymore. You've said before, people aren't dating. This is
to the heart of the matter.
Yeah. And so it's really a sexual revolution that is destroying itself. Young people, they're not even sinning anymore. They're just completely quit living human lives.
The next point, which is very sad and very real and has consequences, which is depression and suicide. Mm-hmm. So they said it would make us happy and liberate us. It didn't. We're unhappy. Depression's at an all-time level. It's an absolute epidemic in our country, particularly among teens and young adults. They don't know what to do in life. They also think they should be pursuing something that gives them comfort, I think.
Yes.
And everybody... No matter what job you end up in or school you end up in, but for college or whatever, you can go into the military. It's not going to be what you thought. You got to grind it out. Then you're like, this is awesome. It's the best decision I ever made. There's got to be, everybody wants to graduate from college and get this perfect job where everything works out. They make plenty of money and everything's rosy. And you got to grind it out, or find a job. It's just kind of, it's one of those things. I mean, when I was working at the Coalition for Life right out of college, mine was the opposite. I was trying to convince my parents and everybody else, no, I have a job, and we're making nothing and all that, and we're running a local pro-life organization. But it's it's basically the total opposite of what most people would want when they graduated from college. And now these kids are there's no jobs. Well, it's because they're not making $85,000 a year, in downtown wherever.
With a gender studies degree?
Gender studies degree, and your job can't make you happy. We have great jobs, fortunately. A lot of people have great jobs. Mary Lisa's cousin, as you know, played 13 years in Major League Baseball. I mean, there's a lot of stuff he didn't like about it. It was should have been an NFL player. Right? It's a lot of travel. There's just basic stuff. It doesn't matter what you do. It's not going to make you happy. What will make you happy is providing for your family, loving your children, loving your wife. And that just gets lost when you have no focus or no mission. And you get depressed. And depression leads to instant gratification. And that's when the sexual behavior goes up. We know contraception can cause depression. This was interesting. Dr. Laurel Williams, who's chief of psychiatry at Texas Children's Hospital, here, a great hospital, she blames the surge in depression on factors including lack of connections that we have in the structure of how we live our lives out. I mean, basically no human interaction.
We're separated. It is a lonely revolution, the sexual revolution. We don't have relationships anymore.
Pre-COVID. This is pre-COVID.
Yeah.
This isn't the lockdowns.
Even in the context of family, what has the sexual revolution done? It's perpetuated divorce, and that the results of that, the impact of that, are no longer do you have like mom and dad and the focus of their lives is their children and their household, but suddenly the children are sort of like orbiting satellites of two different constellations here. Maybe I'm mixing some metaphors, but that's not good for kids. And you seek your place, and where do you belong? And the home should always be that place. There's so much talk about safe spaces. The safe place is the home with mom and dad, and we have completely annihilated that.
So we need to do a shout out on Humane Vitae. Humane Vitae, whether you're Catholic or not, everyone should read it, because Pope Paul VI, and our Protestant brothers and sisters, I know we're bringing up the Pope, but so if you're like, I could care less what he says, we totally understand, you're Protestant, but makes you a good Protestant. But it's a document you should read because he's so far ahead of his time. He said mass use of contraception, just the moral acceptance of artificial contraception, which every Christian church rejected until 1930 when the Anglican Church adopted it. And so by the 60s, it's becoming mainstream. So he writes Humane Vitae, and he gives 3 warnings of what's going to happen. 3 warnings. It's in the 60s. It's like after the war, the Beatles are controversial. I mean, we're moral people. The craziness of the 60s hasn't happened yet. He said abortions will become mainstream. Everybody said it was absurd. Divorce rates will skyrocket. Everybody told him he was a lunatic. And women will be viewed as sexual objects. So, I said that in a sort of what to say when conversation to somebody who shall remain nameless. Educated person who I know. I'll leave it at that. May or may not have been a relative. And that person said to what I just said, it's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the guy's living in the 60s. He's writing this. He's like, this is exactly what's going to happen. Abortion wasn't even legal.
Correlation does not equal causation.
Yeah, I was just like, we're done here. I mean, it's over.
Again, we were promised some sort of sexual utopia, whatever that might look like. I don't know, but we didn't get it. We've got mental illness, we've got suicide, we've got people who are not living meaningful lives because of the sexual revolution.
I have a very depressing theory at the end of this. Okay. I just want to give you the heads up. All right. The third on our list, causes of the bitter pill, the sexual revolution. Devastating health consequences. I think we can sleep with everyone and be fine physically. And we see this in Hollywood. Everybody's good looking. Everybody has it together. You have shows, we quote Seinfeld a lot. You know, they're all sleeping with they almost have 98 STDs. But there's this nice image, kind of a cleanliness in the midst of everybody's kind of thin and they work out and they eat healthy and they're sexually healthy, whatever that means, which is just, I'm promiscuous, takes no talent. I'm promiscuous, I sleep around, but there's a lot of physical, this just gets thrown under the carpet.
Yeah, there is. In 1950, there were only 2 known widespread sexually transmitted diseases. Today, there are more than 24, and more than 1 million people contract a sexually transmitted infection every single day worldwide. 1 million people every day.
1 million people get an STD a day?
Mm-hmm.
And in 1950, there were 2 STDs known.
2 widespread ones. There were somewhere in certain, like, prostitutes might be likely to have more, but there were only 2 that were really in general sort of endemic circulation.
One of the mistakes that I think all movements have done it, the homosexuals did it, the transgender movement does it. Generation Z is kind of big on this because they've been convinced of this, that, we've always had all this stuff. It just got covered up by the churchgoers. No. We weren't always having sex with everyone. People think that we were. The Romans were. I mean, man, yes. Like, there's time periods. But if you look at the United States of America, in 1950, there's 2 known STDs. And we glorify this sex. There was the sexual promiscuity. There's a hilarious Saturday Night Live skit in the 90s, and it was Pierce Brosnan was James Bond. You remember those? Mm-hmm. Pierce Brosnan's James Bond, and he's in the doctor's office, and he's like, he has the tuxedo on with the martini glass, and he's like sitting on the little white paper crunchy thing, and the doctor comes in, and he's like, "Oh yes, James, your blood work worked out, and it's just wonderful. You have 114 STDs, most of which I can't identify." You know, and he's like, "Oh my goodness, that's really." But they put like a realistic like picture out. Like, if James Bond is real and you're running around the world sleeping with random women for a 30-year career under cover, you're probably gonna have an STD or 2. It was really funny. Saturday Night Live like kind of poking fun at it, but that's so true. We didn't always have all this. And we wanted it because we wanted promiscuity. Mm-hmm. And that's the point of this, is to point out that's not free. It's not natural. It's not healthy.
Price to be paid.
Price to be paid. So
there's a lot of innocent people who get hurt from it too. I mean, you've got, especially in other countries, you've got the children are coming down with these diseases that they're contracting during pregnancy, during birth, during breastfeeding. There's collateral damage, I guess you would say, where, okay, great, you've got to live with the consequences, but now your child might have to.
But also, if you take the people, this is a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot. I know people who have an STD. They don't want the STD. The sexual revolution is go out and do it. It's fun. It's all worth it. But the couple who now got married, and one of them or both of them, they're like, "Hey, we went through this." They would do anything to go back and not participate in all this and not buy into the lie or not believe, contraception was going to save them or this was going to save them or whatever. Not to mention the emotional part of this and the psychological part of this, of just feeling used or abused, or the guy never called or whatever, or I wanted to marry her and she ran off with some other dude. Whatever the scenario is, the promiscuity, premarital sex, we've mentioned it on the podcast. It's not old-fashioned. It's an accurate thing, which is if you wait to have sex, we would, have no abortion. There would still be rape, and that would be essentially the abortion debate. But most of this is, some married couples have abortion. It's 14% of all abortions. But
I remember being in high school, and there was some sort of like health class or maybe some kind of sex ed program or whatever, and there's all this fear mongering about how scary sexually transmitted diseases are, and how terrifying they are, and just, man, it's scary. Anybody could get one. I was just like, I'm not worried about them.
I'm out. Pictures worked. Yep. Thank you. We're breaking up. Whatever it is, you're out. And we had that too. We had the pregnancy centers do a great job of this. A lot of them have the men's ministry, and they call the guy in there, and they have like the poster. And this will make everybody run out and get a chastity belt. I mean, it's just like, it doesn't matter whatever you're doing in life. You see this chart, and you start, it's like one guy and one girl, and in the chart, like all their partners, basically you're having sex with the entire world and the aliens from Independence Day, and you're like, I'm out. And then they come in with the pictures of the STDs, and I remember it was actually like a Baptist chastity speaker dude. He was totally cool. The young Catholic chastity speakers were all nerds. He was trendy, and he came to our Catholic school, and he did the chastity thing and all this. And then they did the STD and the pictures. And I wanted to be a priest and planned on being a virgin my whole life as a priest, or if I got married, saving myself for marriage or whatever. Well, just trying to, like, for moral reasons, right? But then you see those pictures and you're just like, even if I was an atheist or whatever, you can forget it.
This is the thing. You or I could get cancer, and there's not really anything we could do about it. I guess don't smoke cigarettes and don't, like, lay in the sun for 10 hours a day. Not that I'd have to worry about that much in Wisconsin. We haven't seen the sun in months.
You're good.
But, you know, there's so much that can hit you in life. You could get cancer. You could get COVID. There's 100 things. This is one thing where you've got, like, complete control about whether you get it or not. These infections. So why not just this?
And this epidemic of STDs is not from rape, and that does happen, obviously, and those are the worst. Because that's reason number 500. The guy should just go to the penitentiary for life. But that's not what we're talking about. We're just spreading this around, and we brush it under the carpet. We do it with AIDS, and that's all touchy because of you're now homophobic if you encourage people not to have sex to avoid AIDS. Monkeypox, remember that? There you go.
Where you had, like, grandmothers who were wearing masks to avoid monkeypox. I don't think you know how this works.
Grandma, I'm not getting into the details with you because it would scar our relationship forever, but you don't need the mask for monkeypox. You're in the clear. The term monkeypox, they got to change that. You can't.
They did. It was racist, so they changed it.
Oh, well, it was racist, but it's also creepy.
I like it.
That's even worse. Okay. All right. We got to get off the STDs. I'm getting creeped out. Okay. Promiscuity also increases the risk of a variety of cancers. That's our last point on the... You have anything to add?
Oh, just the emerging... the STDs are so prevalent that now they're becoming antibiotic resistant.
Right. I mean... It's really bad. And we haven't even gotten to the spiritual devastation of this. I mean, we've all heard from mainly women, and I know a lot of men, but the women, I think, can pull at the heart more. They're just devastated. They feel used. They're culpable, too, obviously, but there's this huge regret. It's the same story. I thought he loved me. He said if we're in love, it's okay. He said we'd be together forever. And... they have sex, they use the woman, they leave. And whether it's an STD or a pregnancy or none of that, but just And what the world wants to do is be like, all right, guys, y'all are giving like the worst scenario. Now you're getting cancer and the H-bomb, and you're getting all these STDs and these horrible... We just want to go out and have fun. She had fun, I had fun. Who cares? We're going to have regret. And that mentality is how it just kind of spreads. A couple of young kids having a good time, and it's not, doesn't work that way.
No.
All right, divorce.
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier. When we talk about the sexual revolution, everybody kind of thinks 60s, early 70s. There was actually, Sean, an earlier sexual revolution that took place in the 1920s. This is when it sort of began.
The modernists.
Yeah, and it was cut short by the Great Depression and World War II. Hard times kind of forced people back into sanity. And so, but nevertheless, you saw the divorce rate begin to kind of increase, not anything like what we've seen recently, but then the sexual revolution in the 60s, you just see the divorce rate go through the roof. It goes from this relatively rare thing to a very common thing. And I don't know. I guess you see there's kind of this trend where people are celebrating their divorces and having divorce parties and divorce cakes, but I think it's undeniable that it makes us less happy. It's bad for children. It's bad for everything.
Most people don't want to talk about the 20s. I actually had to take a college class on this, and the professor was on the board of Planned Parenthood, and she knew I was like a sidewalk counselor, but she kind of knew who I was. Anyways, it was awkward, but she was fair. And she was Irish and fun. But we had to read all that crap from the 1920s, these modernists. James Joyce, I'm not a fan. I love Ireland. I've been to the pub where James Joyce drank, all that. James Joyce basically was considered a genius in everything he wrote, minus Ulysses maybe. The guy just wanted to sleep with prostitutes and it not be a sin. So he's mad at the Jesuits, he's mad at his parents, he's mad at everybody, and he's like having a breakthrough of freedom and all this stuff. And then you realize the guy just wants to hook up and have sex.
And the Jesuits opposed him on that at the time?
Yeah, they were against premarital sex and immorality and trying to get him to correct his ways, and they were mean, according to him. Interesting fact, hated the church, but claimed to love it. Hated it, running around with prostitutes. Wrote a book about himself, Portrait of a Young Man as an Artist. That's the title I recall.
Sounds a little conceited.
Oh, yeah. Roaring 20s. They're like the precursor to the 60s. It's totally true. And he just wants to sneak out in like Dublin or wherever he is and go to these prostitution's illegal, obviously. Ireland's all Catholic and faithful at that point, and just sleep with these prostitutes. And the whole time, I mean, the professor's like, oh my gosh, it was a genius, so free, so ahead of his time. And I'm like, the guy just wants to get some. I don't see how this is so profound. I'm not really moved by this. And he had all this hatred for the church. Then he like nearly disowned his son, because they wouldn't baptize his grandson in the Catholic Church. Like when he got old.
Yeah, it's nothing good comes out of this stuff.
Maybe
that's
it's a struggling soul. I shouldn't beat up on him, but that's the kind of garbage that came out of the 20s that I like personally encountered. Because you think of the 1920s, you're like, this is before the Depression, the Roaring 20s. We just won World War I. This is awesome. We're getting ready to kick Hitler's butt. You know, you're just like as a college kid, and then you read this garbage, and you're like, oh my gosh, no wonder we ended up here. Okay. Sorry for the James Joyce rant. The next thing. Exploitation of women.
We sort of previewed this a little bit with the Humana Vitae line, but it's hard to argue that women are not being exploited under the sexual revolution. We talk about it with abortion all the time. Abortion is made possible because of bad men who exploit women, have a good time, and then leave them to deal with the consequences, lay on that table, have the abortion, suffer with the years and decades of aftermath. And it's not just abortion, it's the whole step of the process. I mean, right now you see bad men trying to sort of legitimize pornography as like artistic expression, and now it's no longer, you're talking about prostitution, now it's sex work. Like, I'm going off to work. What are you doing? I'm going to the coal mine. I'm going to the prostitution house. Like, what is this?
I'm going
insane.
to sex work.
Yeah.
We don't have the stat, but you had the 1950s. How many people were living at home? Mm-hmm. In 1950, how many people had seen pornography?
Now the average first age of exposure is like between 9 and 11 years old, I think.
Today. Rotten, straight from the devil, crushing our culture. And the best argument, you don't have to listen to us, I think it was it Jeffrey Dahmer? No,
Where are you
it's
going with this? Ted Bundy?
Ted Bundy video. We need to Google it. Maybe we can put a link on the show page. The Ted Bundy video is something if you're a middle school dad or high school dad, educate your children, obviously, about pornography and its evil and how to never look at it. Educate them then on Ted Bundy and what he did. Then show them the video of Ted Bundy. Because he did one interview before they executed him. And he said, it all boils down to me looking at porn.
It's pure poison. It's everywhere. And we need to, I guess, as a society, get past this sort of idea that it's liberating to women. I mean, what man thought of that idea, I guess, could be a genius, I suppose.
Let me push back on something you said.
Okay.
Though. I'll disagree with something. Okay, so Hugh Hefner goes to the war, and he's in France, and he has access to pornography. So he comes home, and he knows America's like this moral nation. So he says, I can't get away with this, but what if I make it like for gentlemen, make it classy, like elegant, like high end, Playboy, like nice, we'll have articles.
He's James Bond.
It's not trashy. It's not sex work, whatever that is. And that's gone. I think Playboy's gone. I don't even know if it's still a thing. But it's gone. Now it's just, hey, whatever, right? Fill in the blank. and it's mass produced. It's somebody told me a stat that the money that the porn industry generates is more than Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft combined every year.
It's been a big driver of technology. When you see a new technology come out, like back in the 80s, it was VCRs, right? And there was VHS, which we all know and grew up with, and Betamax. And which direction pornography went led to Betamax going out the window. And so pornography is such a high revenue, big dollar industry that it has a lot of control over the way we live our lives in even very basic ways that we don't think about. And so you said you're pushing back on me. Was it sort of this idea that it doesn't have to be a trashy thing?
Yeah, well, you were saying it's become like classier now, or it's higher end, like it's part of everyday culture. And I think maybe you weren't talking about the porn itself, but the idea was the Hugh Hefner, I'm going to make this nice and classy, and now,
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's classy at all, of course, but it's just more commonplace, I think.
Commonplace.
Like it's hard to escape. There are places that, you don't... I'll put it even this way, Sean. I grew up reading Sports Illustrated, and I don't even want to go to like sportsillustrated.com because you've got like Tom Brady here, and you've got LeBron there, and then it's like you don't know where on this page you're going to find the swimsuit. Forget about it.
The swimsuit edition, like in the 90s, was like, that's horrible. Like, what they're making trash. I know we got Sports Illustrated, and they came out with swimsuit edition, and it was like my mom canceled everything. Okay. We're like, dang it! But the Cowboys are winning the Super Bowl. But it's just trash. And now people are like, "What are you talking about? I'm like wearing swimsuits. Who cares?"
Yeah.
And that loss of innocence, and I think the normalization of porn and it being some kind of that's just part of life. I think there's a powerful secular thing here with just the number of actors and celebrities and just people out there in general that are like, porn is awful. I mean, it fries your brain. And God bless Matt Fradd. He's done so much good, in the Catholic world, and there are other people in the Protestant, but sort of attacking those guys that kind of went from totally addicted to porn to not, and, lead all these ministries. But it just I think it gets glossed over too often.
It does. And this, I think, there's a really interesting theory that I think has a lot of merit to it. You'll see these surveys that come out, and they'll show that, this huge number of young people, especially women, are considering themselves LGBTQ, whatever else the letters that go into it are. And you'll see these numbers like, oh my gosh, how can that many people consider themselves transgender? And the theory goes that women are taking a look at how women are treated in our society. The pornography, the sex work, the just complete objectification of women. And they're saying, if that's what being a woman is, I don't want any part of that. So I'll be non-binary. Yeah. I'll be a boy. I'll be whatever. It's just some way out of the showing up on the cover of I don't know if magazines still exist, but it's a way of avoiding this is the expectation of me, is that I'm a sexual object here available and accessible for the enjoyment of men. I'm just going to cancel.
I'm out. That's a great point. It's a great point. Okay, next, the sexual revolution poisoned the way men and women relate. This is one of the 6 points of, women are going to be sexual objects. But contraception creates a literal barrier. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between having sex knowing the woman could get pregnant and having sex thinking there's no way she can. There's a lack of giving of self. Mm-hmm. And people write this off, but marriage is marriage. It's the complete gift of self. It's what's so beautiful. And you don't have to have sex. You could abstain or whatever. But that whole barrier within marriage, but certainly within men and women in general, contraception makes every woman, fair game. I mean, you weren't a Downton Abbey guy, but if you watched the Downton Abbey, you did. Okay. One of the things they kept doing in that, and of course the author was Catholic, actually did a good job I don't know how it didn't get canceled, because like the homosexual guy is like the villain who no one likes throughout the whole thing. I don't know how they got away with that. But the notion that they go through in that show a couple of times is, if you have sex, you could get pregnant. Like that was the ultimate deterrent when you weren't married.
Yeah.
That's real. That's real. I had high school buddies that were like, oh, I'd love to sleep with her, but I'm afraid she'll get pregnant. They just say it out loud. You're like, what are you talking about? You're a scumbag. No, I'm afraid she'll get pregnant. That's it. So that was the source of their discipline. And that's very real, and contraception removes that in theory. We know it doesn't.
It's a good guardrail. If you don't have virtue, it's nice to at least have some guardrails in place. You can fake it till you make it a little bit. Like if this is going to, you were talking one time about, I can't remember if it was this episode or maybe one other time we were talking, and the best reason to not sin is out of love for God, but fear will kind of like do the trick in the meantime. I think that applies here.
I think that does too. And that has led to our next topic, which is a demographic winter. So nearly 40 countries are projected to experience population decline in 2023. 40 countries going down in population. More than 30 will see no growth. So that's 70 nations. There's only, 96 countries in the world. 70 of them will have no growth or a decrease. And you want to complain? We mentioned before, Dr. Leighton Field, the demographer, was on the podcast. All the sociologists in the world, half of them think we're overpopulated, half of them think we're underpopulated. This is one of the biggest lies you will ever hear. China's now complaining that they don't have enough people to sustain their economy because they have no children, because they aborted them all. And when you abort and contracept people out of existence, you won't have a country. 70 countries out of 96 are either going to stay the same or go down. This is why Elon Musk is running around saying, we need to have children. We need to have children. He does. He has like 8 or 9 kids. But here's his exact quote. There are not enough people. It's a great first sentence. There are not enough people. I can't emphasize this enough, and I think one of the biggest risks to civilization is the low birth rate and the rapidly declining birth rate.
So this is going to hit some people. This is going to hit some people directly in the pocketbook in the very near future, perhaps, because before the sexual revolution, we had 5 people paying into Social Security for every 1 person collecting benefits. That is now down to 3 people paying into the system for every beneficiary and dropping rapidly, below 3 and dropping rapidly. So
because the World War II generation, they came home and they had the baby boomers. Mm-hmm. They had a lot of kids. Okay, and that's when all the population nuts started coming out. We got too many kids. The baby boomers don't have kids, and now Social Security is running low because they didn't have as many kids as their parents. You can't sustain the system. And I once heard a priest say this guy was complaining. He was a baby boomer. We're not even going to have Social Security. And the priest said, it's your fault. You didn't have children.
Yeah. It's funny, but it's true.
Yeah.
They'll find a way to kick the can until we have to deal with it.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other podcast. Okay. Last but not least, birth control's effects have been disastrous. Okay. Just a few side effects. Bleeding, headaches, nausea, bloating, increased blood pressure, complications, blood clots, heart attack or stroke, liver disorders, sexual dysfunction. That's backwards. And it's a carcinogen by the World Health Organization.
What's the line? But other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the show?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'll say a positive on this. I think because of this, I know we're Catholic, and the Catholic Church is the only one that officially teaches against contraception. Now, it used to be all of them until 1930. But there's a trend here because of what we just listed. We're healthy in these days. Like, we're not healthy. We want to go eat Rudy's right now or after this.
Right now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. This is over. But we in 2023 were like, you got to have 3 avocados a day and you got to have pine nuts. So this health craze has been good for the turning against contraception because all these women are like, what is all this garbage we're putting into our body, all these hormones? The hormones in the wastewater are impacting fish populations.
You're trans fish.
They've proven this. We got binary fish now. I'll have the salmon. Make it a she.
The salmon is using them, their pronouns.
Yeah, it's just crazy. But all of the health things, you can talk to the NFP, natural family planning OBGYNs, and they'll say, yeah, no, I have like Catholics, but I've got the naturalist, atheist, or tree worshiper, because they just don't want all this garbage, particularly post-COVID when a lot of people went natural and maybe weren't excited about the vaccines. It's a little bit of a trend turning against contraception. We've also done podcasts where we've had non-Catholics, some people think contraception's a blessing. And I understand the reasons why they think that, and we can debate that. But we've had people listen to our contraception podcasts and say, you know what? It makes a lot of sense. Like, if he's Lord of our money, if he's Lord of our time, if he's Lord of our home and our family, he's not Lord of our fertility. Like, we're going to hold that back within the sanctity of marriage, within this beautiful, life-giving, in theory, marriage. And you're going to hold that back. You're going to control it. You're going to artificially control it. You're going to manipulate it so that you can deny children.
And this is sort of, I think, the fulfillment of that contraception podcast that we did, right? Because we had the contraception podcast. You can check it out. We'll link to it. And Hannah listened to it, and she's like, you know what? In my marriage, I think this is right. We're going to avoid it. We're going to not practice contraception. She had a beautiful baby after she got married, which is wonderful. But she made the great point when we had her on the podcast where she said, look, as people of faith, as Christians, we all know the sexual revolution is a disaster. How can we condemn all of it, but then accept the central premise of the sexual revolution, which is contraception? So I think this puts a bow on it. We're going after not just abortion, not just contraception, but the whole package is evil, and it's making people miserable, whether they like it or not. It's not making them more happy.
It didn't make them happy. It hasn't worked. It's not working. It will never work. We got to move on. It's awful. It's awful. Finding your spouse, spoiling them, sacrificing for them, giving of yourself to them completely. If you're a man, providing for them, loving your bride, loving your groom, and saving sex for marriage, or if you haven't, starting over, that there's just nothing more fulfilling and more beautiful, safer or healthier. It's not us, it's the statistics, and we all know that. And not to mention the elephant in the room, which is just the beautiful, tremendous peace and joy that come with giving yourself to one person and not half the world, like James Bond. So I think that's been a great kind of reflection. We'll put a lot of these statistics in the show notes. But if you have any questions or comments on this, because we cover a lot, so if we said something and you're like, that's not true, I don't believe you, you're lying to me, email us at podcast@40daysforlife.com, podcast@40daysforlife.com. But we'll put everything on the webpage. And be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page if you haven't already. Do that immediately. You will get all the 40 Days for Life podcast early, meaning Monday, not Tuesday, and it is worth the extra day. So thank you, Steve. Please rate, review, share this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless you.